been 250 years, and they still have an issue. That's the judge. They will still have an issue 300 years.
It's high time we dealt with the issue.
400 years. You have dealt with it.
We haven't.
That was a heated moment yesterday in the ongoing debate over a symbol of Halifax's history. City crews ended up covering the statue of British General Edward Cornwallis. Demonstrators organized a rally yesterday because they want the statue removed. Cornwallis was the key figure in establishing Halifax in 1749, but that same year he offered a bounty to anyone who killed Mi'kmaq people. Now, other statues elsewhere in the country are also being scrutinized for their connections to a troubled colonial past, and celebrations of Canada's 150th have sparked debate about how we remember our history in this country. We're back with the Sunday Scrum. John Ibbotson and Katie O'Malley are in Ottawa. Zane Velji is here in Toronto. So, John, you know, I was watching that unfold live on the air yesterday. The statue is there, and 30 seconds later, it's shrouded with this dark cloth. And it seems like a very symbolic gesture. You're sort of covering up the ugliness of the past. But for many people, as you heard from that clip, you know, how do you deal with this? Is this the right way you manage this very difficult history of living I'm an immigrant to this country, a great country like Canada, but that has a very, very dark past, that has some very ugly chapters in its history. How do we reconcile with Indigenous communities in this country?
Well, first of all, it's the 150th anniversary, so it's good that we're having these debates. People are learning about Edward Cornwallis. I learned stuff I didn't know about Edward Cornwallis, and that's all well and good. But look, I understand the importance of symbols, but what matters is substance. There's only this much political oxygen in the room. How are you going to consume that oxygen? Are you going to consume it fighting for improved health care, for improved education in Indigenous communities, or are you going to fight it, spend it fighting over a symbol? There are people who want to change the name of Ryerson University in Toronto because they don't like Egerton Ryerson. Well, never mind about Ryerson's past. Should you be fighting to put quality education into every single Indigenous reserve in Ontario so the public schools on every single reserve are as good as the public schools in the nearby community, which they should be, by the way? Or are you going to fight over the name of Ryerson University? You have a choice because there is a limited amount of oxygen. I'm not sure this is the best way to consume that oxygen.
You know, that's such an interesting point. It kind of leads me into what I wanted to ask you, Katie, because this limited space and energy that we have to fix this conversation that's ongoing in this country. So on the one hand, you've got these symbolic gestures of covering up statues, removing statues, and on the other hand, you have a potential to make real changes in policy through something like the Murdered and Missing Women's, Indigenous Women's Commission and that inquiry. But the commissioner, one of the commissioners just quit because she says it's just not working. And everywhere along the lines, along multiple reserves, around how band councils are working, how education, policing, are we just fundamentally getting this part of our national conversation wrong?
I think that that's what we're being told, and I think that as John pointed out, it's really good that the Canada 150 came along at just the right time where we can have this conversation. I'm going to disagree a little though, because symbols are important, and I can actually understand why, for people who feel profoundly about this, walking past that statue, every day, every week, knowing it's there, that would stick in the craw. So I think that as far as Halifax's ultimate decision goes, I'm not sure what they'll do, but at the very least, moving it to a less conspicuous place is probably sometimes it is little things, and it is these little gestures that form the trust and form that relationship that then you can go on and start addressing the big problems.
Well, we've certainly seen a similar debate happening in the southern United States when it comes to symbols of the Confederacy, of the pre-Civil War sentiment. Many African Americans feeling uncomfortable with a celebration of people who founded modern-day United States of America, but who also represent a part of the history that represents slavery. And so, Zane, what I wanted to address with you is that how this national conversation unfolds, unfortunately, increasingly seems to me to be occupied by extreme points. Now, whether it's anger on the one side about what's happened on the past, or like that clip, a sense of defensiveness from someone saying, well, get over it. It's done now. What do you want? It's been 200 years. And surely most people are somewhere in the middle who can see both sides of the argument and just want to move forward. How do we strike that balance? It's just that conversation has just become so ugly and so extreme.
That's the million-dollar question, right? And what makes this even more complicated is that these are not top-down infrastructural conversations that are happening. These are not premiers and mayors and councillors, addressing these. These are issues, and certainly they are addressing them. I don't want to make that mischaracterization. But the issue bubbles up from a more decentralized authority, which is the citizenry. So you add politicians into this and how they weigh into the conversation and how they apply their political lens to it, and you've got a whole bunch of, in their case, voters now crowding a particular and crowdsourcing a particular denouncement or an ad hoc denouncement of this. It complicates the scenario even more as to, should there be a criteria? How do we do it? Do we throw away the entire history and contributions of an individual, when they had this moment or this period of regret or dark choices that they made? And it actually almost relitigates our history in many ways, which makes it complicated, because there's a very stark difference between, of course, celebrating someone for what they've done in the accomplishments that they've made versus actually, just understanding what they've done and not losing sight of it. And I think some of the times, because of your point to these extreme views, some of these conversations are now moving towards, let's just erase this out of our history completely, which I think is an unfortunate counter-reaction to the very polarized tension that we see.
Well, the conversation will certainly continue throughout the year of Canada 150, but certainly there's no quick solution. So we'll continue to watch, and I want to say thank you to our panelists. That's all the time we have this week for our Sunday Scrum. From Ottawa, I was joined by John Ibbotson of the Globe and Mail, Katie O'Malley from iPolitics, and in Toronto, political strategist Zane Belchi. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.